What's up, ladies and gentlemen? DH Thorne here. Well, this particular demon in review should probably be called an outer god in review, because this video is going to be about the Lovecraftian entity called YOG SOTHOth, or YOG SOTHOth, depending upon how you like to pronounce the word. Some might even say YOG SOTHOth, because I think that there is one proper pronunciation for the Egyptian spirit Thoth, or Tot, or Thoth, depending upon how you like to say it. Those are the three most common ways that people say it. Anyway, this should be called an outer god in review, because this particular video is going to be specifically about my interaction with that spirit, that egregoric mask of something that is much bigger. Now, before I get into things, I want to talk a little bit about my last video that I did before my last live stream, where I was talking about the Lovecraftian current in general. I had no idea what to call the video. I was kind of all over the place. I couldn't quite get my mind really wrapped around what I wanted to do. Originally, that video was going to be a demon in review of YOG SOTHOth, or YOG SOTHOth. I'm just going to say YOG SOTHOth. How about that? We'll just try to stick with that. It was going to be about that, but I was actually experiencing what I can only describe as a dimensional shift, as a phase shift from one reality to another. Now, I know that's hard to believe. I know it's hard for people to accept. I know it's hard for you guys to get your head around. So let me talk about that a little bit, because it's actually really relevant to talking about YOG SOTHOth. So I have come to the conclusion that at least the way I utilize magic is less about manipulating reality and more about transitioning my subjective awareness into the timeline or reality or universe in which I truly, as a higher being, want to be. In other words, instead of doing magic to cause and effect to happen and create a linear chain of events that gets me what I want, I am literally picking one of the many infinite multiverses or near infinite multiverses that likely exist, and my consciousness is keying in on that frequency that I'd want to experience, and then assuming the identity of the physicality of that universe. Now, this is a little bit highbrow metaphysics. This is kind of something that's going to be lost on most newcomers to the practice of magic. But I will briefly summarize a little bit. Again, this has a lot to do with YOG SOTHOth, so please just bear with me. The idea here is that if non-dualism, the idea that you are source, is true in some form, whatever your variant of that philosophy is, then that means that essentially what you are is everything you experience all at once. And everything that you experience has its own individual perception of that experience that is not necessarily shared across one perception to the other. But you're still all the same thing. Think of it this way. Your hand is the same as what you are, but your hand has a separate experience of being a hand than the other hand has. So your right hand and your left hand have separate experiences, but they are both part of the totality of experience that you are. What you are as a higher being involves everyone and everything that you see around you, but your awareness is built upon this ego story that you think you are, and so therefore you're kind of not trapped, but you're kind of focused on this one little tiny feature of this entirety, because it's impossible to focus on the whole thing at once and have it have any meaning. So you have to zoom in to give it meaning, and you have to zoom out when you want to transition, we'll say. So understanding that, and then understanding the principle of the multiverse and how there may be an infinite number of pretty much self-similar fractal universes, which are pretty much exactly the same, but there's one little minor variation before it sort of repeats again. So in some universe, I've got blonde hair instead of black hair, or I've got a full head of hair like I used to have, or even though I could probably grow it out, it's not like I'm going bald or anything, I just shave it. But, someday I'll go bald probably. In some universe, you're doing the video and I'm watching it. So just like Rick and Morty, there's like an infinite number of universes, and there's sort of a spectrum of similar universes. Going with that understanding of potential, what if then magic is not the changing of reality to suit your needs, but rather the changing of reality in the same way you might change clothes? What if it's more along the lines of, I'm tired of watching this particular episode, I'm going to watch a different episode? What if instead of changing reality, you're leaping to another reality? The quantum leap principle of magic. There is a style of I don't know if I would call it magic, but I don't know if they'd call it magic. It's the quantum jump or the quantum leap system of reality change, where you start to act like the thing that you want to be. And this does work. I've experienced this by changing my own behavior to accept what I am. What I am has come to manifest. So in other words, I went from being this guy who was quite literally a nursery worker, who was moving around big heavy trees and getting muddy all day, and I was a fat oaf, and I'm still a bit of a fat oaf, but I'm less now, by acting like the sorcerer D.H. Thorne, the black mystic, by acting like this person who I truly identify with. By acting this person, I have sort of shifted my reality in such a way that I am now experiencing this reality, not the one that I was in before. That nursery guy doesn't exist the same way he did. It's a memory now. You know, I don't work at that place. Of course, they remember me working there, but the person that I am now is different. And I could go into this whole time doesn't exist and all this other kind of good stuff, but I want to get into the YOG Sothoth, if I can, because that is what I kind of have identified as one of the egregoric mechanisms by which your identity can transition from one reality to another. I've also identified a little bit more going on this. So let's go a little bit into what he is. Now, Lovecraft probably never really got that deep into the higher metaphysical principles of YOG Sothoth. He was a horrible monster that gave birth to people and so on. You know, in the Dunwich Horror or whatever, and there's several different stories that feature YOG Sothoth. And this spirit was never represented in the way that I saw it, at least as far as I'm aware, in Lovecraft's writing, although maybe some of his later people who copied his work and created works based on that character basically fleshed out what I'm talking about. They may have seen something similar. Basically what I'm trying to get at here is that the spirit that's in the Lovecraft work, I think, is just a seed of an idea, and then this whole egregore has formed based around that idea. So what is YOG Sothoth? All right. YOG Sothoth represents, to the best of my understanding, and there's probably spirits, I believe, in the Hindu culture that would kind of overlay this once again. A lot of times I find that Lovecraftian entities sort of have a Hindu overlay in the Hindu pantheon, or in the those various religions from that current. There's a lot of deities there that sort of fit Lovecraftian ideas, but they're like the dark version of them. They're like, you know, like instead of being like Vishnu, like a protector or whatever, it's an evil version, right? Or a dark version. Instead of just being something that dreams the universe, it's something that is a nightmarish monster that dreams the universe, right? Because Lovecraft had sort of this reflection on things that he probably saw in other cultures that scared him, and he just kind of twisted them to be like, yeah, that's a pretty scary concept. What if it's not this, you know, beautiful Indian-looking, you know, spirit, you know, or whatever, you know, the depictions are in Indian artwork? What if it's a monster, right? And I'm not saying that that's what his thought process was, but if you know a little bit about these things, you can see the correlation, is all I'm saying. He connected a lot of things to Egypt and so on, and that was kind of necessary because at the time when he was alive, all this Egyptology was coming about, and there was a lot of discoveries with that, and it was a pretty remarkable time to be alive, really, with that stuff. All right, so anyway, so YOG Sothoth, or YOG Sothoth, I have identified, both through working with it and just my intellect, you know, just thinking about it, represents the consciousness that is all consciousnesses. It is a being which contains all of the awarenesses of all the beings in all of the multiverse. So in other words, every single iteration of yourself or other people, your dog, your cat, everything that can experience and have a self-aware experience, at the end of a very, very long kind of root system, shall we say, or leaf and tree system, like branches, when you get to the core of it, there is a being that knows all. It is everywhere, it is every when, it can experience and be and know all of these different minds. So in other words, if I was going to put this in a smaller frame, because I'm going to have to start talking about fractals a lot more soon, because fractals have a lot to do with what I'm talking about. You, as a person, have within you a lot of different inputs that create we'll say, the emergent conscious awareness that you have of who you are. Every little nerve ending, every little fingertip, you know, all of your different senses, they all come together and blend together and create this collage of understanding of a very small little wedge of reality, a very tiny, if you think about the universe, you're just a teeny tiny little pinhole that experiences a universe. But you're made up of a whole bunch of aggregate senses, and those senses are limited too. They're just a handful of possible senses. You don't see all the colors that are possible. You only have 3 different color cells in your eyes. Some people have 4, very rare have 4. Some people have 2. It's a little bit more common than the people who have 4. People who are colorblind have a deficiency in one of their different color sensing cells in their eyes. I'm kind of getting all lost in the weeds here. My point is, you have all of these different sensory inputs, and each one of those could be thought of as an experience. These experiences merge to form one conscious experience that you experience as a self. YOG SOTHOTH is basically the same concept, but instead of being limited to one body, it is all the bodies, all the possible bodies in all of the universes, big and small, from the smallest conscious body to the largest. So anything that can have an experience of self, at the very least, I don't know if it would count for things like amoebas and stuff, but certainly small animals, maybe insects, certainly people, whales, dolphins, bats, dogs, anything else, maybe even aliens on other worlds. In fact, certainly aliens on other worlds. So all of these different identities, their collective awareness, their collective conscious, if you will, but not in the sense of like the Jungian collective human conscious. This would be a cosmic omniversal, in other words, containing all of the multiverse consciousness that is all of it. It is quite literally the all-in-one and the one-in-all. It is the source awareness. Whereas there's a source, this would be the source awareness. This would be like source is everything and nothing. Source awareness would be like the thing that experiences itself. It would be the I in the void, if you will. And this, of course, led me to talk to YOG SOTHOTH about Legion and some. I'm kind of got a lot to say here, so I hope I can kind of unpack this a little bit so you understand. Legion was referenced when I spoke to YOG SOTHOTH. I said, so Legion is like the dark eye within, right? It's like the opposite side of the Eye of Providence, where the Eye of Providence is the all-seeing eye, which is actually a close approximation in a lot of ways to YOG SOTHOTH, but we'll get into that in a moment. Legion would be the dark side of that. There he is now. YOG SOTHOTH would be all of it. That would be the Eye of Providence, Legion, the whole works. Everything, every kind of awareness, every kind of self-conscious, self-identity, self-knowledge is experienced by this singular source consciousness. Now, that is not YOG SOTHOTH, but YOG SOTHOTH is that. What do I mean by that? People who work in these fields, people who practice magic, people who do a lot of work with different spirits and entities, make the very common human mistake of thinking that the entities that they're working with or talking to are in fact the names and descriptions that the mythology gives them. This is a very human problem, and it's very difficult to explain away from people. That is, when someone really sits in that truth, it's really hard to get them to see that that's the truth that they're in, that it's limited. They think, well, of course Satan is real. I've talked to him. Yeah, well, Satan is an idea. No, Satan's real. No, he is real, but Satan is an idea. The mind behind Satan is real too. But Satan, the idea, is just an idea, and it's actually a mask worn by something. So an awareness, a consciousness, a spiritual self. That's the same thing you're doing. You just don't realize it. So YOG SOTHOTH is, in fact, an egregoric mask that humanity created using Lovecraftian fiction to overlay this entirety of consciousness. And it's actually been repeated in other pop culture. I think it's Hermanius Mora, I think is what the name is, in Skyrim or Elder Scrolls lore, or whatever it is. I'm not that big on that Elder Scrolls lore. A lot of my fans are. And when I started talking about YOG SOTHOTH, they came out of the woodwork to say, "Oh, you're working with Hermanius Mora now." What are you talking about? So I'll have to look more into that. I can see why that probably is the little bit I have looked into it. But anyway, getting back to my point. So this being is quite literally a conduit through which your consciousness can travel and experience other conscious worlds. It's not easy. It's not done without permission, because YOG SOTHOTH is the gate. YOG SOTHOTH, you can't just be like, well, I'm going to decide to go here now. No, YOG SOTHOTH is you. YOG SOTHOTH is that conscious singularity of total awareness. It knows everything. It is everything all at once. You, in a way, you're YOG SOTHOTH. In fact, you are in a non-dualistic sense. You are that. That is what you are. So you've kind of separated yourself away as an ego. You're saying D.H. Thorne is not YOG SOTHOTH, and that's true. But YOG SOTHOTH is seeing through D.H. Thorne. It's also seeing through you. It's seeing through everybody. And not just in this one universe, but in all universes. So YOG SOTHOTH is the gate. The same way we say that someone's eyes are the windows to the soul, YOG SOTHOTH being the awareness behind all the eyes, it's a gate to all universes. And in the form of magic, as I'm starting to understand what I do, gates are much more and more important all the time. The more I work with magic, the more I'm coming to understand, as I said earlier on, that I'm not changing how reality plays out, because that's already what it is. There is only now, there is no future, there is no past, there is only now. Time is an illusion. So what I'm experiencing when I'm experiencing the world is an illusion of time and space. It's basically an awareness that's scanning through all the potential universe that can happen, and it's picking a certain kind of causal timeline. And whatever reason it's doing it that way for, I can only, mystify and imagine, right? I can only be poetic about. To actually say why would probably be something as simple as just because it feels like it wants to experience that world for whatever reason. It just wants to, right? Just like you want ice cream tonight and not tomorrow. So YOG SOTHOTH represents just one iteration of this idea of the highest of the higher selves. The highest awareness that you can be would be YOG SOTHOTH, and its real use as a spirit in magical work is to give you an egregoric interface so that your ego egregore can interface with this, and there can be some sort of interaction, and it kind of creates an easier interface. It kind of makes it easier for you to think about how you might transfer from one reality to another. So how does this work? Well, imagine again that let's simplify it again. You're just you, right? You're just Bob, Sarah, Jill, D.H. Thorne, whoever you are, and you're constantly aware of everything that your body has going on, at least in your superficial senses. You don't necessarily know what your heart's doing or your guts, unless there's something going wrong or they do something wacky. You usually don't know what they're doing, but you're pretty well aware of what your body's doing. You can, if you think about it for a second, you can feel your feet and your hands and your head and your eyes and everything else. You can feel everything. But you can also, if you want, you can also focus all of your attention on one body part for a little while, and for the most part only focus. I can focus all my attention on the tip of my finger and become really aware of what the tip of my finger is feeling, to the exclusion almost, if not completely the exclusion of the rest of my body. I can just about move my entire awareness into the tip of my finger. We can all do this. It's not that hard. Just a little bit of meditative practice is all it takes. Most people can easily move their awareness into their hand and go, I feel like a hand right now. Most people can do that. So what's doing that? Your awareness is moving into these places, and it's traveling into these little conscious experiences. YOG SOTHOTH represents the ability of your consciousness to do that, not just in your immediate body, but in the entire multiverse of bodies. So that in magical ritual, something that will give your consciousness a rational way to do this jump. It's just another way to do it, by the way. We'll talk about other ways in a moment. It gives you, as a magician or a sorcerer or whatever you like to call yourself, a way to leap into another reality that follows something that you've decided is rational. So there's a whole bunch of ways to rationally jump, basically gatewalk to another universe. That includes just changing your... So when you set up a causal sequence of events, you say, I want to be an Air Force fighter pilot. So if you want to be an Air Force fighter pilot, you know that if you're trapped, at least in this material world that you live in, where there's certain rules and there's social constructs and such, you can't just like walk out of high school and go to a military base and suit up and fly a fighter plane and do that. You know that to do that, you're going to have to go to college so that you can be an officer, so that when you join the Air Force, and you have to have good eyes, and you have to pass the right tests, you have to be good at this, X, Y, and Z, have the right rank, and if you're lucky, you'll get put into a plane, and if you're lucky, maybe unlucky depending upon some people's views, you'll be put into a fighter plane, or maybe you want to be an astronaut, same story. So you've got to jump through these different gates, these different hurdles, these different causal gates of experience. And when you've jumped through enough of those gates, you end up in the manifestation of, I'm a fighter pilot, I'm an astronaut. The same thing applies to any reality you want to experience. And it can be rational or irrational. If you're a little crazy by the standards of society, jumping to a reality where you're the president might be just a simple matter for you. You did magic, and next thing you know, you're the president. And next thing you know, everyone thinks you're crazy because you think you're the president, but they're experiencing a world that you're not. Maybe in your world, you really are the president, right? We've talked about this before in our sanity discussions. So YOG SOTHOTH represents those gates, those different kinds of gates you can go through. And they can be rational, they can be irrational, they can be magical, they can be mystical. There's all different ways you can do this. So you have those rational ways of going through the gates, but then you have the magical ways. So the magical ways of going through the gates is, I did a ritual, and then I took some mundane action, and then somehow I had the manifestation of the experience that I wanted to experience when I did the ritual. So you feel like you caused something to happen. What really happened was you did a magical ritual. This opened up a portal, a gate in your consciousness, or in your conscious field, or whatever you want to call it, for you to literally quantum leap into a timeline or a reality that you wanted to experience. Now, I'd like to say that this can go anywhere. And to be brutally honest, I haven't tried to go to really bizarro places. I've only done this once so far. I did what I thought was a quantum leap. Wasn't even a big ritual. I literally just got into a heavy trance with YOG SOTHOTH, and I visualized myself just shooting through like a wormhole, and I visualized the reality that I wanted to experience, and then I finalized in my mind, this is the reality I want to have, and we're going to watch this play out, and I'm going to trust it. And just like any magic, I'm going to do that, and then just kind of, for the most part, cut it off, except for when I absolutely have to face and remember that I did it, to have a discussion about it, perhaps, which might spoil it. Maybe I'm jumping back to that old reality because I'm filling my mind with a doubt, and then I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be back in the world that I left. Who knows? That's tough to say, honestly. But I'll know in a few months if the thing that I chose to jump into ended up being where I landed. Now this, of course, could be seen as just a kind of insanity. And this is where that Lovecraftian madness stuff comes in. This is why last week when I did that video, I was way out of it, because I had been working in this current, really trying to get this to happen, truly trying to get my own consciousness to do this. And for a little while there, and even now, like you probably notice I'm talking a little different. Maybe I'm not talking different. Maybe this is how I've always been to you, but I feel different. It was almost like I landed in a body that wasn't the one I was in before. And my ability to concentrate and do the things that I'm used to doing was affected by the new biology that I'm now consciously aware of. Maybe in this iteration, my mind's a little bit scatterbrained because I didn't quite line up my intention right. Maybe I wasn't careful enough about where I landed. I still feel fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with me. It doesn't work that way, but I feel like my thought processes are a little different now. My way of speaking is a little different. I'm finding it a little harder to stay watch some of my older videos. I maybe sound a little bit more like I'm really spooky and here's what and I feel a little bit more like, I don't know, like I can't stop just running my mouth, like I'm nervous, but I don't feel nervous. Like I can't explain it. You might notice. Anyway, so I did this jump, and then for the next couple of days, I felt out of sorts. I felt a little bit of a depression. I felt a kind of disassociated disconnection from people and places around me. And I hadn't talked to my friends really much in a few days. I was feeling very isolated. And I remember thinking, I haven't talked to Matt, my friends. I haven't talked to my friends in California. I haven't talked to my friends here and there. And I didn't talk to people like E.A. Quetting, and I didn't talk to, people like Zarafina and JD even. I didn't talk to anybody in like a few days. And, these people who are my real life friends and then my online friends and so on, I felt this great disconnect from them. It's almost like I lost touch with them, like I left them behind somewhere. And I also felt like when I was doing that video, I felt like I was drunk, but I wasn't drinking. And some of you guys who watched that video noticed, I forget what minute it was, maybe it was like the 13th minute or so, I sort of snapped out of it for a little bit, and I was very cognizant and very back to normal. Throughout that entire video, and before and after even, for quite a while, for the rest of that day, I almost felt like I had a stroke, and I almost felt like there was, if I looked to my left, there was an infinite number of me's going that way, and then an infinite number of me's going to the right, and I was trying to figure out which one was me and trying to pick one. I couldn't quite do it. I shot hundreds and hundreds of takes of that video. Maybe not hundreds and hundreds, but dozens and dozens, we'll say, you know, like 3 hours worth of trying to make that video. And you could say, well, that's the reason why your video was screwed up, Thorne. That's why you were kind of in a weird state, because you were tired and you kind of overdid it. Maybe, but I've done that before. I've done live streams for 3 or 4 hours, and it didn't have that kind of effect on me. This was something else, and I have to tell you that that was a night that I really heavily invoked YOG SOTHOTH. I did a full attempted invocation of that spirit. I came up with, I had gotten a chant for YOG SOTHOTH from YOG SOTHOTH himself. This is literally just a chant that my egregoric being that I've identified as YOG SOTHOTH gave me, so you don't have to put a lot of faith into it. It's not a password or anything. You can use your own. I'll give it to you guys in a minute at the end of the show. And I did this, and I used the methods that I'm used to using for any kind of spiritual invocation. And I opened a gate using a sigil on paper. I had my candles going, I had my incense going, and I chanted this till I reached a certain amount of ritual ecstasy, ritual abandon, till the words lost meaning, till I was just rocking and saying the words. And it took about 5-10 minutes, and I was completely just lost in that. And my mind was wandering all over, even though it was empty. I don't know how to explain it. That's the best way I can put it. And then I tried to do that video, and man, it didn't work. It did not work at all. I kind of went crazy. So YOG SOTHOTH, if you want to work with YOG SOTHOTH, if you want to try to reach out to this egregore, and this is just an egregore, this is just a mask, this is just one way of perceiving that higher self-consciousness that is all. You can cut out the middleman and just understand it as the all-seeing self that you are. Or you can use the Lovecraftian egregore if it appeals to you, use it. I don't think it's limiting. I don't think it's a negative thing to do. You know, you're already living in a world of symbols that you've created for yourself. You might as well enjoy the symbols and use this as a symbol as well, and just work that path the way you want to work it, or don't, you know, whatever you want to do. If you want to work with this being, there's a lot of different, people who have different takes on it. There's several different books to talk about it. I will maybe be doing a special book just on him, a short one, maybe like one of those 30 or 40 or maybe 50, 60 page books that I was talking about privately, about doing mini grimoires and things like that. I may do one of those maybe in time for Halloween or something. We'll see if I get around to it. If I don't, it's no big deal. I can always release it next year. There's always going to be an interest in YOG SOTHOTH, right? But basically, there's a lot of different, currents. There's a lot of different magical systems you could try to use with him. You could use like the traditional demonolatry way. You could get an idol. You could use a sigil. You could use chanting. You could use all of this stuff. There's really no wrong way here. Now, this is what I came up with. If you want to use the one that I used, if you feel called to it, let me just make sure I got my pages right. This is my journal grimoire. This is the one I use when I'm writing sloppily. In fact, I don't know if I showed this in my last video. You can kind of tell when I am working with the spirit and I'm really kind of out of it versus when I'm with it. I'm going to show you a difference in how I write, and maybe you guys will understand. Give me a second here. Let me get a couple different comparative pages. Sometimes I write in this book while under the influence of a spirit, and sometimes I am completely lucid. So here is a couple pages about just magical writing that I was learning about. You can see my handwriting's sloppy, but there's a certain neatness to it, right? It's not horrible. It's not that great. It's not that bad. It's lined up good. It's, the lines are pretty straight and even. Then I go into just total, like I'm just writing like in a state of trance. And do you see the difference? It's like a completely different person. It's almost like I'm writing left-handed, right? So anyway, let's see, what did I have here? So first things first. This is the sigil that I basically identified was the one that I wanted to use for YOG SOTHOTH, and it doesn't have to be exact. If you want, you can, I'll hold this up for a minute and maybe I'll do a screenshot of it, but if not, just pause the video if you want to copy that. That's my gift to you. Assuming that someday I may put a book out, it's still my gift to you guys. Go ahead and use it. And it doesn't matter which way it is. You can put it this way, you can put it this way. It doesn't really matter. So long as you have this kind of visual of an eye in the center with a lot of little eyes attached to tendrils. That's all you really need, and that'll be good enough for you. So I put in here some things about it. This was my initial, journal entry for it. It is a supreme being of divination, but it doesn't easily cooperate. It already knows your mind. You cannot reason with it, however. You cannot ask it to do anything, nor command it, certainly not deceive it. There's nothing it doesn't know. So you can't fool it, you can't trick it, you can't say, do this and I'll give you that. It already has all that. It doesn't need anything. But it does crave experience, and it does crave knowledge. It will grant knowledge only if it wishes it. In other words, if it decides to share with you its divination or its knowledge of another world or a potential future, it's going to do so. You can't make it do this. There's no way to hold it hostage. There's no way to make a pact with it. This isn't a greedy being. This is an all-seeing eye, guys. It's not like you're going to just talk it into shit. No pacts, no relationships, no way to force it to comply. We are literally insignificant. It would be like one of your nerve endings, not even your nerve endings, one of the very tips of your nerve endings trying to tell the brain what to do. It's it might give it a little bit of pain, and the brain will just cut it off, right, and just ignore it. If it does show you anything, it may come from the infinite omniverse. In other words, if it does show you something that's divination oriented, so maybe it's showing you something and you think it's the future, well, it might be showing you only one of the infinite possible futures that exists. And so therefore you can't trust it as normal divination, even if it tells you that's what it is. It may be showing you this because it wants to influence you for some reason. In other words, refer back again to that Lovecraftian element of madness, okay? The idea here is that the human mind just simply cannot resonate with the infinite the way the infinite can resonate with the individual mind, if that makes sense. So you personally, as an individual, cannot understand what it's like to be the universe. And the only way the universe can understand what it's like to be you is to be you. So somewhere in the middle, probably, there's some kind of higher self that can kind of, unite these things, and that might be what Nyarlathotep really is. And maybe I'll revisit him soon, because he's a very important feature of that current of magic. So if it does show you something of a divinatory nature, what you see might not be causally linked or rational at all. It might literally be a fantasy, and you won't be able to tell the difference between a fantasy and its predictions. But it may be something it wants you to think about or know. Maybe it's showing you a false future, but it wants you, for whatever reason, maybe it's not even about wanting you to. Maybe it's just it knows that that's what you need. Maybe it's just part of the program that you've kind of made for yourself. And so it shows you this outcome so that you do actions and things that maybe influence that outcome for the better or for worse, so that you have an experience it wants to have. Maybe it will show you a vision of your boyfriend or girlfriend cheating on you, so that you go to the house and you have a fight with them and it's proven that they're not cheating on you. Not because they're warning you that you're being cheated on, but because they want you to have that experience of the argument. Maybe that's what it wants, right? So be careful. This is not a spirit that you use. This spirit uses you, if that makes sense. Be careful with this. All right, so this was what I was given as a chant to use, and some notes that I took about this spirit, what to use in ritual. This is just what I use. This is not, YOG SOTHOTH wasn't like, use this or else. This is a magic spell. This was like what I channeled and what I decided was best and what I work with. This is how I do it, okay? All right, let's see. Yes. So here it is. YOG's, oh, sorry, I'm gonna start over. My handwriting's garbage, right? My handwriting's utter garbage, so forgive me. YOG SOTHOTH. Esta Nugaro YOG SOTHOTH. Nogaro Inrilia Eya Yog Eya 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 Yog Sothoth. You would repeat that in a chant over and 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 over again until the words, they're already mostly gibberish, until they completely lose all meaning whatsoever. They're just noise that your body's making. Your consciousness will start to drift at that point and begin to visualize this entity. You can use this sigil, of course, in that work. You can grab your sigil and gaze at this sigil, chanting this until ecstasy, and then just go into your deep trance work and just go there. This spirit, I don't know if I would say it manifests any kind of poltergeist activity. It hasn't happened yet that I'm aware of. It might, but I think that this is an astral awareness. I think this is something that you go inside to experience, not external. I don't think this is a thing that you can summon into a ritual chamber the way, I mean, maybe you can summon and create an egregore for it, perhaps, sure, but it's not something that you're going, that exists in this external sense like other deities do. This is something you go to meet. This is something you open a gate to and you go to. We're going to talk a little bit more about gates. This is going to be a long one, but we're going to be done in a minute. I like to use crystal balls, okay? Quite literally almost any kind. There's no real limit, but I found that obsidian, this one in particular, I haven't dedicated to it, but I use it the most for Lovecraftian things because it doesn't show up really well on the camera, especially with the lighting, but I forget what this is called, you know, silver flash or golden flash, but it's got like an eye in it. You might be able to see it right there. It's kind of got an eye and an orb there. And that's very much like what I saw. And I did artwork for it, which I probably will be flashing or have flashed on the screen several times. If not, here's the artwork that I did. And this artwork is literally what I saw in an astral trance working with this spirit. Yes, I elaborated a little bit to make it artwork, but that's basically what I saw. And its colors that I like to use for it are green, red, black, and blue, especially green. Okay, you may have noticed for a few days there, my videos all had green lighting, and that's very intentional. The incenses that I liked for it, for multiple reasons, which I'll talk about in a moment, mugwort, wormwood, and dragon's blood. Now, why is that? Well, mugwort and wormwood are both entheogenic, very mild, of course. And, you know, when using those as incense, especially the actual herbs, they tend to have a very, very tiny, teeny, tiny, imperceptible influence on your ability to astral travel and have vision work done. And dragon's blood is just generally a very good energetic offering. It represents a lot of energy, very primordial energy. It's a good incense for when you're trying to give a really strong gift of energy. So that empowers this journey. So these other smokes kind of get you there, and then the dragon's blood gives you the energy of just breaking through the gate. Okay, so more about gates. This will be probably where I leave off here. While playing Call of Cthulhu, early on in the game's story, and for those who don't know, I stream this on my Discord channel. Some of you guys may not know, but I have a Discord server up, which I don't know if I have a link for. I'll try to put one in the description or in the comment. If you want to join it, you got to follow the rules when you join. Sorry about that, but you got to agree to that, and then we'll let you in deeper into the place. But I had done some streaming of the game Call of Cthulhu on my Discord channel, and early on in the game's story, you were looking at a painting. It's like in the first 10-20 minutes of the game, so I'm not giving anything away. You're looking at a painting, and part of the notes talk about how art can be a portal to other worlds, and I'm like, well, yeah, duh, of course it's like that. But then I realized that it's literally a portal that goes both ways. You know, when we paint, or when we write a story, or when we make a movie, if the multiverse theory is true, and if that theory includes an infinite or near infinite number of iterations of reality, that means that a lot of the movies we watch are not movies. They're also potentially actual real stories that are happening. Maybe there is a galaxy long, long ago, far, far away, and there's a bunch of Star Wars characters running around. Maybe there is a Hellraiser dimension where the Cenobites are. Maybe all of these things are real somewhere in the multiverse. It's plausible, if not possible. Maybe it's limited to what physics says is possible. Maybe you couldn't have Star Wars. Maybe you couldn't have Cenobites, but maybe you could have everything else. Maybe everything else that's in these stories can happen. So if that's true, what's happening when we're consuming this fiction? These are virtual metaphysical gateways to other worlds, and it goes both ways. They influence us by us witnessing this fiction, and then we can go there in our imaginatory, in our inner astral mind. We can go there quite literally and experience those universes or some version of it. And this gets to that whole idea of my imagination in the astral realm again. Anything you can imagine is real in the astral. The astral may be just the imprint of everything that is possible in the multiverse on our conscious mind. That could be what it represents. It could be just the mental component of anything that's possible in all universes. So therefore, anything may be accessible. You may be able to use it as a gateway, a portal to literally any universe or any reality. And E.A. Quetting, when we were hanging out privately, you know, we've been playing a little bit of D&D and some other stuff together, and I created this world setting for a short-lived little game session that we did with him and some people we know. And you know, he said something about how my world building for Dungeons and Dragons is like I'm channeling another world. He said, have you ever thought about your world building and fiction writing as channeling another world? And I said, well, yeah, but I never wanted to really make it like an occult work, because I just kind of figured, you know, I shouldn't even say occult, a metaphysical work. Occult means hidden, right? And sometimes I overuse that word. Make it like a metaphysical thing. You know, at some point I have to say, well, this is just fiction and this is magic, right? But working with YOG SOTHOTH or YOG SOTHOTH, the lines between fiction and reality are blurring a lot for me, and I'm finding it that it's easier for me to rationalize how the impossible is possible. Again, triggering that little bit of Lovecraftian madness that goes on. So again, you know, the Lovecraft current is helpful. I think working with that Lovecraft current, one of the things that is useful about it is that little bit of madness that you will experience when you work with it intentionally. When you work with that madness enough, it opens up your mind to the possibilities of things that shouldn't be possible. It opens up the potential for the impossible to be true. And if that's the case, maybe Lovecraftian magic is a key to higher metaphysical truth, to higher metaphysical magic. Maybe Lovecraftian stuff, when you fully work with it, when you fully accept it as being plausible, that opens up a huge gate that was closed before. If you really think that this is the real world, but you can do magic in it, you have a very limited worldview. But if you realize that all of this is an illusion, and that your subjective reality is the only true reality, and then on top of that, all of these fictional realities could potentially be real and you could go there. Anyway, guys, if you like my work, if you like what I'm doing, you want to support me, you can really help me out, of course, by liking, sharing, and subscribing to this video. You can check the description or the first comment for links to ways you can support me financially. I kind of really recommend right now, especially for the month of October, that you pick up a copy of Shadownomicon if you haven't already. The energy of Shadownomicon is very fitting with the fall, you know, Halloween atmosphere. It's also very much, you know, like just a little to the side of the Lovecraftian current. There's a lot in common with the madness and the stuff that's going on. Plus, there's a lot of magic going on with the Shadow People right now. There's a lot of people working with this book and with the things within it. And it's one of my better books, even though I could probably edit it a little bit better. There'll be a version 2 at some point that's better edited. But I highly recommend this book. People have gotten a lot of great results. It's very good. So check it out on Amazon if you want to support me. And of course, you can go to www.mindtheshadows.com, and from there you can see it's basically a portal to everything that I have, both my professional services, some blog posts, my books that are currently out for sale, and some other stuff like that. So if you want to support me, that's a great way to do it. Anyway, guys, until next time, mind the shadows.